The outcome of the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 would become a pivotal moment in history, setting the course for France and Germany to change the future of Europe. France entered the Franco-Prussian War as an empire ruled by Napoleon III, the nephew of Napoleon I. A series of swift Prussian and German victories saw the capture of the emperor and the decisive defeat of his army. With the fall of the Second Empire, Republicans quickly seized Paris and declared the Third French Republic. German forces besieged the capital, eventually capturing the city, and selected the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles as the location to crown Wilhelm I, the Kaiser of the new German Empire. To add to the humiliation, France was forced to give up the two border provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. Following the surrender, Paris became occupied by the radical National Guard militia, who rejected the authority of the new republic and set up in its place the Paris Commune. The red flag was soon flying over the city. For 2 months, the communards ruled unopposed. In what became the Bloody Week, the regular French army finally arrived and brutally suppressed the revolutionaries, regaining control over the capital. Although the Commune had fallen, its legacy would live on. The German philosopher Karl Marx considered the Paris Commune to be the ideal prototype for a future revolutionary government. However, for the time being, the French socialist movement had been suppressed. The French section of the First Internationale was dissolved, and the various groups in the country were driven into exile or imprisonment. As for the French government, they would not forget the annexation of Alsace-Lorraine, and would continue to teach French children about the lost regions. By 1892, the first Bourse de Travail, the first labour exchange, was created. Following a series of mergers of trade unions, this would lead to the rise of the CGT, the Confédération Générale du Travail, the General Confederation of Labour, a trade union dominated by revolutionary syndicalism. In the CGT, anarcho-syndicalism flourished. The Confederation advocated the use of revolutionary class warfare and the implementation of general strikes to achieve their economic goals. Émile Pourget, the French anarchist who served as both the leader and vice-secretary at various times, was one of the first to grasp the potential of a general strike. In his revolutionary paper, La Voix du Peuple, the voice of the people, he published his views. Look what would happen if the coal was to run out in a fortnight. Factories would grind to a halt, the big towns would run out of gas, and the railways would be at a standstill. All of a sudden, virtually the whole population would be idle, which would give it time to reflect. It would realise that it is being robbed blind. His philosophies of sabotage and direct action would influence the important decisions of the CGT in the coming 20th century. Revolutionary syndicalism itself, in short, was the advocation of the overthrow of capitalism by the working class, and in its place the establishment of a new social order based on collectivized trade unions, known as syndicates. When the call for war came in 1914, the people of France welcomed it. The chance to avenge the defeat of 1871 had finally materialized. The people, en masse, enthusiastically enlisted. The French socialist leader, Jean Jaurès, appealed to the working class to help to prevent the war, but in his efforts was assassinated by a nationalist fanatic. With his death, the last major voice against the war fell silent. The trade unions and socialist parties rallied behind the country, deeming it necessary to defend against Prussian militarism. Léon Jouhaux, now the leader of the CGT, declared, "All working men, we take to the field with the determination to drive back the aggressor." The CGT, under Jouhaux, agreed with the left-wing movement at the time to participate in the Union Sacrée, the Sacred Union, which was a commitment to the government that they would suspend all sabotage activity and call no strikes during the war. In the opening weeks of the Weltkrieg, the French army went into the conflict wearing the brightly coloured red and blue uniforms still in use since the 1870 war, and applying the antiquated strategy of marching towards the enemy out in the open, which proved disastrous, inflicting the highest casualties in a single day for any country during the war. As German forces pushed their advance, the French and British were able to prevent Germany from reaching Paris, and forced the Imperial Army into a full retreat, denying the German Empire the quick victory it desired. While the rival armies dug in following the battle, it became clear that France would have to fight the war on its own soil, and the new development of trench warfare would mean it would be a long war. The static war on the Western Front had meant little to no land was gained by either side, despite the massive offensives launched by the rival armies. On the home front, resistance to the war was starting to grow among the labour movement. The anarchist Sébastien Faure, who had always opposed the war, was beginning to find support amongst various syndicalists and anarchists for embracing his position of pacifism. The anti-war movement was emerging. By 1917, the costly Second Battle of the Aisne had driven parts of the French army to the point of mutiny. Since the beginning of the war, 1 million Frenchmen had died, with no clear victory in sight. As many as 30,000 soldiers refused to carry out their orders. The men had grown sick of the endless slaughter and having to carry out suicidal attacks. The new commander-in-chief, Philippe Pétain, met with the men to listen to their grievances. After agreeing to grant them concessions, the men returned to their duty. Luckily, the Germans hadn't attacked. The continued prolongation of the Weltkrieg had now strengthened the growing anti-war movement, not just in France, but all over Europe. The French syndicalists and anarchists had founded an organisation to now openly oppose the war and rally militants to its cause. This discontent led to a series of international socialist conferences convened in Zimmerwald, Switzerland. Delegations from 10 nations, including representatives from France, Italy and Germany, met to coordinate the opposition to the war. In conclusion, the German and French delegates issued a joint manifesto declaring, "This war is not our war." The disagreements occurring in the socialist community would ultimately lead to the fall of the Second Internationale. Back at the front, war weariness had truly set in among the men. Pétain had successfully placated them up to that point by promising them they wouldn't have to conduct any more offensives for the rest of the year. The problem now was the men knew all too well that would soon be coming to an end, and more grand offensives would have to take place. After Germany concluded its peace with Russia, the Allied High Command agreed another massive combined offensive would be needed to achieve a breakthrough in the enemy lines before the Imperial Army could finally outnumber them on the Western Front. Therefore, the Entente launched its Great Spring Offensive, but ultimately failed to accomplish any of its goals, ending in catastrophic defeat for the Allies, inflicting over 800,000 casualties and spreading more dissension within the French army. The now battered and exhausted French army was on the verge of total breakdown. Inadvertently, the men were granted a short reprieve as the Germans consolidated their positions in the west. The French Prime Minister, Georges Clemenceau, was somewhat successful in reinvigorating the men and reaffirming their hope of a final victory. On the 2nd of March 1919, the Germans launched an all-out offensive, achieving a decisive breakthrough into the Allied lines and forced the Allied command to order an impromptu defence. In the chaos, the Entente armies became separated, and on 31st of May, Paris became encircled. As the front line grew worse, the CGT made its move. Émile Pouget, leading their plan, announced, "It is time for this abominable war to end. We will declare a general strike." The general strike was declared throughout to paralyse the nation. Back at the front, the Supreme Allied Commander, Ferdinand Foch, was dismissed and replaced with General Pétain, who moved swiftly to salvage the situation by applying a combination of a defence-in-depth strategy and an armoured counter-attack response. His tactics proved successful as the front line stabilised, even achieving a small breakthrough in the German advance. However, it wasn't long before mutiny once more resurfaced. All across the Republic, reports of soldiers deserting and refusing their orders en masse was occurring. Word soon spread to the general strike. Émile Pouget declared, "Let it be heard. All troops must disobey their orders. All men must remove their shackles. Come together as brothers, for this will be our moment." The national government called for the strikes to be harshly put down and insisted the army make one last-ditch attempt to relieve Paris. Pétain desperately tried to organise another counter-offensive, but was hindered when the divisions on the front openly stated they would no longer follow any orders instructing them to fight. Faced with the grim reality, Pétain informed the government he could no longer sustain the war under the current conditions. Georges Clemenceau conceded, "The war is lost. I weep for France." With the fall of Paris imminent, the government relocated to Orleans and requested a formal armistice with the Central Powers on the 4th of October 1919. The German army, now unopposed, marched upon Paris. With hostilities ending, the national government issued demobilization orders to the French army, but the majority of men refused to go home. When the brutal terms of the peace became clear, the government under Georges Clemenceau refused to cooperate and collectively resigned. A provisional government under Aristide Briand was formed and proceeded to conclude peace with Germany. On the 6th of November, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. France accepted Germany's harsh territorial demands and economic stipulations. The outcome of the treaty caused immense outrage amongst the civilian population and the armed forces, leading to more mass protests. As the situation grew more agitated, the provisional government issued an ultimatum to the remaining mobilised men to finally stand down. Once more, they refused. The CGT, now backed by other socialist parties, declared their solidarity with the mutineers and launched another general strike, this time the largest in French history. This led to violent clashes erupting between the protesters, the mutineers, and law enforcement. Following this, the socialist parties began a boycott of the French Parliament, and alongside various radical liberals proclaimed themselves as allies of the CGT. The panicked provisional government, fearing an impending revolution, chose to declare a state of emergency and ordered a military response to restore order, which they dubbed their Forces of Reaction. As the loyal divisions set out, the CGT and its allies declared the government illegitimate and an enemy of the proletariat. The revolution had begun. The mutineers and unaligned deserters joined up with the revolutionaries. Émile Pouget, while not the official leader of the CGT, became the central figurehead and mouthpiece of the uprising. He declared to his followers, "A righteous war is delivered. We face a great danger, but together we, the workers, will overcome the bourgeoisie state." Throughout the nation, sporadic fighting broke out between the French nationalist forces and the now growing assembled coalition of leftist forces. The French National Army quickly found itself split up and surrounded. This prevented the military command from effectively coordinating, resulting in most commanders acting independently and ignoring the authority of both the provisional government and the general staff. In the leftist coalition, many factions developed. The most troublesome for the leadership was the Bolshevik Jacobins, a radical organisation inspired by Lenin and his brand of communism. They directed their armies to loot and burn the properties of the aristocracy and upper middle classes, seizing their land by force and subjecting them to revolutionary tribunals. The Jacobin leadership stated, "This is the great purge of France, to forever destroy her class enemies." These acts instilled the fear of a brutal Red Terror in the country. The nationalists responded with their own reign of White Terror. As the war proceeded, 3 words slowly became the main rallying cry of the leftist forces: break the chains. Within months, northern France was lost. The scrambled National Army was forced to retreat to the southern coast. Neutral Switzerland moved to occupy the French region of Haute-Savoie as permitted by a clause in the 1815 Congress of Vienna. After the crushing Battle of Avignon, the French army conceded that the war was lost and agreed to the fateful decision to abandon the mainland. With the arrival of the still loyal French Navy, what was left of the army and thousands of refugees evacuated at Nice to French Algeria, setting up a government in exile. Before leaving, Pétain told his men, "We leave today, but make no mistake, France is not dead. We are France." Securing the coast, the revolutionaries on the 10th of April 1920 declared total victory and consequently formed a provisional communal government. At the request of the German Empire, a communal delegation went to ratify the peace agreed by the former government. The initial Treaty of Versailles was altered to recognise the new circumstances, granting Germany the territorial demands it originally asked for, except the lands now occupied by the syndicalist militias. Both sides agreed, and on April 24th signed the Treaty of Nancy. German forces finally left Paris. The communal army triumphantly returned to the capital and was met by crowds flying the red flag. A convention was convened to draft a new constitution with the various factions of the leftist coalition. Together, they agreed to unite behind a syndicalist socialist consensus and founded the Federation of Communes of France, composing of 36,000 communes. Émile Pouget was elected the first premier of the Comité de Salut Public, the premier of the Committee of Public Safety. The CGT had successfully cultivated themselves as the revolution's legitimate political leaders. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to prevent the Jacobins from appearing as an integral member of the revolution. On the 18th of May, addressing the first Bourse Générale du Travail, the General Labour Exchange, Premier Pouget spoke, "Comrades, we have created something beautiful. We have deeply changed the world forever. We are the legacy of the Paris Commune. Long live the Commune." A year later, they introduced the new flag of the Commune of France. As Europe entered a new decade, the rise of syndicalism was just beginning.
Support the war effort by subscribing to this channel. Happy holidays!